Okay, good evening, everyone. This is a special meeting of the Rutland Town Select Board. Today is Tuesday, April 29th at 6 p.m. And the primary purpose is to meet with the Regional Planning Commission for their presentation. We have a few other items toward the end. We have a full Select Board tonight: Kurt Hathaway, Joe DiNardo, Mary Ashcroft, Matt Getty, and Sharon Russell. And we're not, because this is a special meeting, we're going to skip over the things that we usually do other than the Pledge of Allegiance. And then we're going to hear a brief report from the Road Commissioner. So please rise and join me for the pledge. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Dave, you have something for us.
I do.
Okay.
Somewhere in your melee, there should be a
Oh,
map that looks like this
Yes.
from Otter Creek Engineering. So, this looked a lot better when it was in color, but anyway, if you look at it, this is the proposed changes for that sewer issue we have down on the south end. So they're basically proposing, just, dropping in a new manhole on the Denny's line, the line coming from Denny's from, north to south, that first one. And then on the opposite end, we've got the existing manhole, just north of the Time and Run driveway. And then all of this pipe in between will be new. So the manhole that's kind of set back a little bit is the existing. That's the one that comes from Days Inn. So we would put a new manhole in front of that. And it would all run north to that, from the south to the north would be the third manhole with the line going across to the manhole at Taco Bell. That would be the route of the new sewer line.
Crossing Route 7 South, crossing Cop John Drive.
Yep.
And going into what, the Taco Bell driveway?
It's not their driveway, it's a green strip
That's
between
it.
Taco
Oh, is it?
Bell and the little strip plaza there.
Okay,
And then that line continues on down past Hampton Inn.
okay.
So this would eliminate that line going across the road to in front of Sports Clips there. Robert's preparing, right now he's working on the permit submittal for the state to do their thing. He proposed open cut. This is going to be about 17 feet deep. And,
Wow.
And state of Vermont said, maybe, but you got to try it once.
Once. Well,
Oh.
that's better than
Yeah.
3
So
times.
we're going to have to put a sleeve in. So his proposal is to go from the proposed new manhole across to the middle of the green strip between Route 7 and Cop John, and then open cut from there because we own Cop John and
Right,
we
we
can
can
go the
do
rest
what
of the
we
way.
want, yeah.
So that's about 120 feet,
Okay,
126 feet or something like that, which is not horrible. It's about a foot of drop in that 120 feet, so it's pretty damn flat. But the volume of water coming out of the car wash should push that. It shouldn't be a problem. And then we may end up putting in another manhole, taking out the Taco Bell manhole.
Mhm.
If we need depth, we could put in a deeper manhole and get a little bit more pitch on that piece of pipe coming from where we come out of the ground with the boring, and get a little bit more pitch on it if we need to. If we don't need to, we'll just go into that manhole and tighten it all up and keep on moving. So he's working on the permits for the state. He should have those in, if not by the end of this week, then the first part of next week. And then we'll be ready for bid. It'll be bid docs and the whole thing.
okay.
So we'll be ready to put it out to bid
Why does it,
within a couple weeks,
why does it need to be 17 feet deep?
because that's where the
Where it is.
existing, that's where the existing stuff is.
It's where the flow flows from.
That's,
Part-
yeah,
part
you can't push, you can't make water
This
go
over
uphill
here,
on
this-
gravity.
This here is 17 feet.
No, it'd be 17 feet deep going across Route 7.
Part of it's because where Denny's is, and the other side, they're lower than Route 7 by what, 7, 8 feet?
Couple
Oh,
feet,
yeah.
well, it's 6 feet. This manhole over here that we're having the problem with is 6 feet deep,
Yeah.
rim to invert, and it's all of 4 feet from the rim on that manhole to the street level.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So we're 10
plus
feet there
maybe.
anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
We-
all
It's
right.
because Route 7 is so high compared to the,
The
Right.
sewer line got put under there and then Route 7 got upgraded and built.
So
up
it's all
higher.
the state's fault is what you're
That's-
saying.
Yeah.
Yes,
Absolutely.
but they take no responsibility.
Yeah,
Right, I
exactly. Good
understand.
luck with that.
so if we do the open cutting.
Yep.
It allows us to continue to use the line that's there without interruption,
Right.
well, the construction, right? Cause we're going north.
As much as we're using it now, yeah.
Right, well, right. If,
Okay.
if we go in the same place, then we got that problem with where does it go while we're working?
Right.
So I like the idea of the new change, but somewhere in between here is where we gotta try the
There
board.
there will be not necessarily a conflict, but there will be this line that goes across the road now will have to be located. And then this line will have to be adjusted to get past that line so we don't have a direct conflict.
So where would
We
they
may have
do?
to do some bypass pumping for a short period of time as they're digging past there, which might be A1 going down there and just sucking it out and keeping up with the flow and run and dump and come back and suck and whatever, just so they can dig through there and they're not digging through flowing water.
Yeah. So if they gotta, do a boring or try, where would that route be?
Right here,
The new route?
the new route. Yeah,
That would be
so they'd have to
where
dig a sending pit and a receiving pit on either side of Route 7.
Yeah.
Set up a machine and
And-
send the sleeve through.
that-
Either way, the sleeve goes in.
So what you're getting the bids for is the boring.
Be for the entire project, for the
For the
new
whole thing,
manholes,
okay.
the whole thing.
All right.
Cause the manholes will go in that,
From
Yeah, where
signage to grass seed.
because
All of it.
the pit would go where that manhole's gonna go. Once they get
Yes,
across, and then,
yes.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
and there's nothing there now, right?
The only other conflict that there could be would be that 16-inch water main, but that's not 16 feet deep.
No.
So
I don't know how deep it is on our side, but
it's 6 feet at best.
yeah,
6, maybe 8.
they should be able to
I
locate,
doubt it's 8.
they should be able to
Maybe when they did
locate
Top
that.
John, they
and
might have raised everything and it might have gone a little bit, but
They should be able to locate
What-
that.
yeah, oh yeah.
What do you need from us tonight?
This is just information. Just
Okay.
passing this along, but just know that this is in the works. We're moving forward with this as I'm assuming we want to. Then
Speedily as possible.
speedily as possible.
Yeah, all right.
And if we're lucky, the boring will work.
If we're
Yeah.
lucky the warrant, I mean, it's,
Would be nice.
yeah,
You would think that even if we got across the pavement, the state would be okay with us opening up that grass between Cop John Drive and.
yeah, we're gonna need a permit from the state for digging in the right of way.
Yeah.
That's an easy lift.
Yeah.
And then from there on, we own, so.
Okay.
And that makes it look better than the 210, 220 feet we were talking.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, we cut it basically in half.
That's good.
Good.
And, cutting 100+ feet of boring out reduces your deflection rate by huge numbers.
Yeah.
And they'll be putting a lot of 10-inch. So we have to sleeve that and then put the pipe through it.
Yes.
All right.
And then if it doesn't work, we just leave the sleeve.
Yeah. Yep.
So unless there's more, we should move on to
Yeah.
Yep.
our main business for the evening.
Yep.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
We'll have more questions comes next.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah. Okay.
I might have more information then.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys. Have a good
Right,
night.
thanks.
Okay. Was anyone that you know of going to be zooming in? Okay.
I didn't
Pretty dry.
encourage zooming in because
Yeah,
I'm not
'cause it's
sharing
hard
anything
to-
digitally, and anything that we would be looking at, you could just listen
My
to
due
discussion.
diligence.
You wouldn't be doing it.
Okay. So the floor is yours. Could you introduce yourself, please?
Sure.
And
I'm
go to it.
Stephanie Burke, planner with the Regional Planning Commission. And I'm one of a team of 3 from our office that is out conducting meetings with all of our towns for the 3rd and final phase of community engagement for the regional plan update. So others have come before me at earlier phases. We kicked off the update back in the fall of 2023. So we've been working all of 2024 and into this year to get to this point where we're ready to be releasing the first full draft of the plan in early June. And so in this 3rd phase of engagement, we're calling alignment. We're inviting all of our community, our member municipalities and the general public to comment really on the first full draft of the plan. And the questions that we're asking for people to think about and respond to as they're looking at the plan. So the first question is, does it reflect the right community economic development priorities for the Rutland region? And then the second one being, do these priorities make the region a place that you want to live, work, and play? Right? So in earlier phases, we've asked for people to share what's important to them. And in the second phase, we kind of reported back on what we thought we heard, and we shared our draft policies. And now we've taken all of that into consideration along with all of our staff research and are ready to unroll the first draft. So tonight, what I'll do with you is kind of walk through what the purpose and design of the regional plan is, a quick summary of what the plan is and why it's important, give you then an overview of the plan chapters, and do kind of a deep dive into the land use chapter, and in particular, the current working draft of the regional future land use map. And then I'll wrap up with some opportunities for providing input. All right. So just as a refresher, if you've heard this before, the requirement to produce a regional plan is not something that the Rutland Regional Planning Commission just thought was a great idea. It's actually mandated in Vermont statute that all regional planning commissions in the state of Vermont produce this type of plan. So each of the 11 RPCs are required by statute to produce a regional plan. It is a comprehensive 8-year plan. So we're looking to finalize and get our plan adopted early, about this time next year. So it's the regional plan 2026 is what we're calling it, because that's the year it will become effective. So it's an 8-year plan to guide and accomplish coordinated and efficient community economic development in a way that balances economic development with social, cultural, and environmental priorities. So it's a very broad, diverse, kind of all-encompassing type of plan that is intended to help shape the pattern, design, and function of communities in a way that will best meet future needs. And what distinguishes this plan from others working in the community economic development arena is the analysis of present and future land uses, and specifically the production of a future land use map for the region. None of the other folks working in community economic development have that responsibility. That lies solely with regional planning commissions. So that's kind of the core of this plan and what distinguishes it from others working in this area. To make sure that our plan, not only does it fulfill what's required in Vermont statute, we also chose some core design principles to align with our organization's Declaration of Inclusion and Title VI plan. So those design principles were, flexible, locally led, equitable and sustainable, and outcome driven. So flexible in order to best meet the unique needs of 27 different municipalities in the Rutland region. And we've got a pretty broad range of population sizes, incomes, it's a pretty broad suite of municipalities, locally led, like what we're doing tonight, kind of meeting each of our towns, really looking to solicit input from the whole community, in order to increase the probability of the success and better ensure that some communities are not favored over others. And then in terms of the design principles of equitable and sustainable, those are to demonstrate that embracing those concepts of diversity, equity, and climate resilience are going to be key to achieving our community economic development goals. And outcome driven in the sense that we want to ensure that the goals and the policies in this plan have clearly defined actions to be completed by the Rutland Regional Planning Commission, and indicators of progress or measures to gauge how successful we are at completing those actions. So the plan itself relies on statute Title 24, Section 4348A, to define all of the elements that are required to be in a regional plan. So at the core of this plan, as I've just mentioned, is land use, right? And all of the different kind of bubbles surrounding land use are the required elements per statute, and they reflect the actual chapters, the topical chapters in the plan. So we're looking at obviously economic development, cultural resources, transportation, housing, community facilities and public utilities, enhanced energy, the working landscapes, so thinking agriculture and forestry industries, natural resources, and then finally climate resilience. So touch on a lot of different topics, all in our opinion and statute integral to community economic development. So tonight we're going to kind of do a deep dive into the land use chapter specifically. And to tee that up, were folks able to at least skim through or review the prep material so you have some idea of Act 181, or were you able to attain one of the Act 181 trainings that our office held last week?
Well, we had the handout that you
Okay.
sent us, and then Barbara Noyes Pulling
Yes,
had
obviously.
done a
Yeah.
review a while ago about the changes to Act 250, and our question had been, is there anywhere that we had a growth area in Rutland Town given our donut configuration and a lack of a village center? So
Well, let's talk. We'll talk about that for
Okay.
sure. That'll be part of tonight's discussion. But I want to make sure folks kind of understand the bigger picture framework, and then we'll dive into kind of Rutland Town specific. So Act 181 was passed into law in June of last year, and it overhauled Vermont's land use planning framework. It was intended to really kind of modernize how Vermont directs public investments to designated areas. And it was an attempt to help speed up Act 250's transition to what they are calling location-based jurisdiction. So we'll get into the particulars of that. What it did not change was the long-standing land use goal in the state, which is to plan development in a way that maintains the historic settlement patterns of our compact downtown and village centers, separated by a rural countryside. So that remains kind of the state land use planning goal, and it is the goal for our regional plans land use chapter. Act 181 laid out 11 new land use categories. 7 of them are what we would consider kind of focused on more higher density growth areas. And then 3 are really lean more into that lower density growth or conservation type land uses. And the 11th is a land use category called hamlets, which just are a dot on a map, and there aren't any in Rutland Town. So the ones of interest will primarily be, those that are focused on higher density growth and lower density or conserved areas. So the slide here kind of lays out for you what those 11 new land use categories are, and the prep materials provided definitions for each of those land use areas. So in order to have an area mapped as one of these new categories, it has to meet the definition for that area. Okay, so just something to keep in mind. I think in my opinion, and I don't really do town planning, but this standardizing land use categories across the state makes a lot of sense to me. Prior to that, if the current 2018 map for Rutland Town is underneath this one. And, it's got different land use categories in the legend, but essentially you had 11 different regional planning commissions that were able to basically come up with their own land use categories, which makes it really hard, I think, when you're talking to your neighboring regional planning commissions, because that's part of that's one of the plan chapters. You have to talk about your plan in the context of your neighbors in the state. If people are using different land use categories, right? If you're not really talking apples to apples, you're talking apples and oranges in some cases. So, the establishment of 11 new land use categories that are uniform across the state, I think, is a good step forward. There's a lot of them, which is kind of like, do we really need all of these? But anywho, nonetheless, I think the standardization is a benefit. So in terms of the land use categories, the left side of the chart, a downtown center, represents kind of highest density, and then we kind of move down the spectrum from left to right. But there are 4 of the land use categories: downtown center, village center, planned growth area, and village area. Those now are the land use areas that will align with the new state designation program. So I don't believe Rutland Town currently has any kind of downtown or village center designation under the state designation program. But you will have an opportunity for that with what's being proposed, if that is of interest. So with the new state designation program, they're going to be consolidating. There are 5 different categories currently, and they're going to be streamlining them down into just 2. You're either going to be a center or you're going to be a neighborhood. So if you've got a land use area mapped in your community as either a downtown center or a village center, those will automatically transition at the beginning of next year as a center and be eligible for the benefits in that category under the state program. If you have a planned growth area or village area, those would transition in under a neighborhood designation. So in the prep material handout, I think towards the end, there was a table that kind of showed you the different benefits under the state designation program. So there's definitely more information available about, what that means for that area within your community. So those same 4 land use areas are then the ones that we would talk about if you were eligible for Act 250 location-based jurisdiction. And I'm gonna honestly kind of skip over that for you guys because you're not eligible.
Right.
So you have to have zoning as one of the prerequisites to be eligible for Tier 1. So we don't really have to talk about it a whole lot because it doesn't apply in your community. I just want you to know that that this exists, right? And it's intended as if you are a Tier 1 if you seek tier 1 designation, that's where there would be either reduced or eliminated Act 250 permitting in certain designated areas of your community. Okay. If you were, so that's not on the table. Tier 2 areas are going to be everything left in your community if it's not tier 1 or tier 3. And in those areas, it's Act 250 as usual, kind of what you're accustomed to in terms of the traditional triggers for Act 250 jurisdiction. The tier 3 area is where there will actually be expanded Act 250 jurisdiction for critical natural resources. Where those areas are and how they will ultimately be defined is the topic of future rulemaking to be done by the Land Use Review Board. So nothing that I'm showing you tonight will align with a tier 3 area. That's going to go down a separate track with more information coming next year on that. So that's kind of the framework for Act 181. In terms of the region and the current working draft of the regional future land use map, there's this first slide here kind of focuses on 7 of the land use areas, because the map is intended to guide development by designated areas for growth and areas for conservation based on the existing environmental infrastructure and community factors. So what I'm really trying to convey on a regional scale is that the percent of total land area that will be designated for higher density growth on this map is 6% of the region. So for the 7 land use categories, downtown center, village center, planned growth area, village area, transition area, enterprise area, or resource-based recreation areas, across the whole region, we're looking at, 6% of the land area for those particular uses. Okay. In terms of the neighborhood, we'll have 16 designated neighborhoods in the region. 9 will be for planned growth areas and 7 will be for village areas. And in terms of centers, there will be now 39 designated centers represented by 9 downtown and 30 village. Currently under the state designation program, the region has, I think, 34 centers, so a combination of downtown and village. I think we have one of the other kind of neighborhood areas. It's in Rutland City. But for the most part, there are opportunities with what's being proposed for future land use to expand the areas where you'd be eligible for a center designation and the associated benefits. Okay. Next slide, we're really looking at the areas that are designated for lower density growth and conservation, which would make up 94% of the land area in the region. And if you think back to the land use goal, these percentages pretty much fall in line with the goal to maintain the historic development patterns where you're focusing development in downtown and village centers that are separated by more of a rural countryside. So in terms of the 3 rural land use categories, the rural conservation, is just over 42% of the land area. All 27 of our towns have a rural conservation land use area mapped. Rural ag forestry is 35% of the land area in all of our 27 towns. This land use category is really determined by the current use program. So if a parcel is currently enrolled in either the agricultural or forestry part of the current use program, it shows up in this land use category. So everything left that isn't one of the higher density land use categories or rural ag forestry or rural conservation falls into kind of the more rural general. So the rural general category, you know, has almost 17% of the land area, but it contains currently about 40% of the buildings in the region. So the rural general is, you know, it's appropriate for that lower density growth. It's not, even though it's in a rural category, it doesn't mean that it's not meant for any kind of growth, I guess is what I'm trying to get at. Okay, does that make sense?
That could be taken two ways. That last sentence you just said. So that's why I'm looking puzzled. So the rural general is appropriate for lower density growth.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes, yes. All right. So any questions on kind of the framework, the bigger picture? I want you to have a sense of, you know, how the region is shaping up so that when you look at the percentages of the mapped areas in your community, you have a sense of, okay, this feels balanced with what's going on in the region or not, right? So again, this map over here, the blues and the greens and the kind of yellowish, those are the three rural categories. Everything else that's kind of dark purple and then the shades of pinks, those are your, you know, downtown village center, planned growth area, village area, enterprise area. The orange, which there is very little in the region, but a lot in Rutland Town, are transition infill areas. So, you know, you can kind of get a sense from, you know, the bird's eye view of the regional map, kind of how things are lining up with, you know, 94% in that rural, lower density land use category and 6% in that higher density growth, you know, the greater number of land use categories. So let's dive. So basically we've taken Rutland Town's map out of the region and popped it here in a bigger layout so that you can kind of see better what's going on. So in terms of the map and how the new land use categories were then translated into boundaries on a map. Again, there was an opportunity to standardize that process, that methodology across the state. So all the regional planning commissions were interpreting and essentially mapping these new land use categories similarly. So at the beginning of the year, the Vermont Association of Planning and Development Agencies, also known as VAPTA, if you dabble in the planning world, produced a standardized statewide methodology for the land use, for how to determine the boundaries of these new land use categories on the map. What kind of data would be used to help define, you know, where these boundaries fall. So in Rutland Town, you've got a pie chart here that kind of summarizes things for you, but you see your top three, rural general, rural ag forestry, and rural conservation comprise just under 92% of the land area in Rutland Town. And then you have a transition infill area, an enterprise area, and a village center. So those three occupy just over 8% of the land area in Rutland Town. Yes.
Where's our village center? Right here?
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's this pinkish color on your map. So the boundary for this was basically the Center Rutland State Historic District boundary. So if you look at the prep packet and you look at the criteria for what can be used to qualify as a village center, state historic district boundaries make that an eligible area. Okay, so that's the darkest pink on your map. The enterprise areas are basically cupboards, Velcro, and the Route 4 kind of strip.
What are they
Business Route 4.
Business Route 4.
What
Yeah,
do they
sorry.
consider? What do they consider enterprise?
So I would refer you to the prep materials. And basically, if you read through the definition of enterprise, they're basically areas that are either industrial uses or like earth resource extraction, like gravel pits. So any area that has an existing kind of industrial flair and the utilities, the infrastructure to support that land use. So
Interesting
that's
choice.
what's on there currently for enterprise. And then Rutland Town has the most of the transition or infill land use areas, I think, of any of our 27 towns. So you'll find those in this orange color here to the north, here going east on the south end of town, and then here on the west side. So kind of radiating out from the city along 4 and 7. And then, you know, this bluish color represents the rural ag forestry. The darker green would be the rural conservation. So if you see kind of a green patch cutting through other areas that are mapped for kind of higher density development, that's because this reflects either a FEMA floodplain boundary or a state river corridor boundary. Because if you read the definition for the land use categories, if those areas are not regulated by the municipality, they are pulled out of those higher density growth land use areas. So this is a pretty good example of that kind of going in through here.
But if there's a floodplain in a rural area, you just assume that because it's ag and forestry, you don't need to designate it further.
Correct. It's not, if it lies within one of those higher density growth areas, it gets pulled out.
Okay.
But if it's in one of the rural areas, it is
Just there
it's
because
just there in the rural. So that's kind of the punchline. Woo! Tonight was really intended to start a conversation. This is the first time that the regional future land use map is being shared with the public. So we want to make sure that you have some time to kind of dive into this deeper with maybe your planning commission, or other committees or commissions in town that might have an interest, like energy folks or economic development folks or conservation folks. I'm not sure what you have. But we're hoping within 3 weeks of tonight's meeting. So we're targeting by May 21st. If you have any questions or adjustments that you'd like to see made to your map, we'd like for folks to submit those in writing to Logan. His email address is provided here in your packet. Because there is a standardized methodology for developing the map, there isn't a huge amount of opportunity to make like sweeping changes. But certainly there are opportunities on a case-by-case basis. If you feel like something is really misrepresented on the map, in terms of the land use categories, those are not negotiable. So you're not gonna, don't come back and say, hey, we'd really like to see like a historic, land use category on the map or something, you know what I mean? The categories are the categories. That was kind of part of the 181 restructuring. So we don't have flexibility with the land use categories, but we do have some on a case-by-case basis opportunity for boundary adjustments.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm gonna walk up and take a look at
Absolutely.
some.
I was gonna do
yeah.
the same thing.
Yeah, and I have a
I gotta
question,
look at this thing.
because
I'll
I've
do my
been,
best.
I've been asked that question. And I think Ed has that question.
Okay.
I have
That's Route 7.
54 acres of farmland
Okay.
with a registered historical site on it that
Mhm.
we chose to have registered
Mhm.
because there's Indian artifacts.
Mhm.
My concern and my husband's concern is that is our land. We have worked it. We go all the way over to Hathaway's polo field. So what my husband has always done is we allow people to walk through there
Mhm.
and we take good care of it. He takes excellent care of it all
Mhm.
along that river. That's important to him. He's a farm boy, and that's the way he was raised.
Mhm.
So if I wanted to build a shed on my property, I have to get permission from you folks to do that.
No, we're not a permitting agency. No. So whatever local, land use bylaws Rutland Town has in effect are governed, right? Unless a development triggers Act 250.
Well, it wouldn't be a development on our farm. It's not going to happen.
Right. I'm just saying. So,
But
you
what
know-
I'm saying to you is we have been good watchers of our land,
Mhm.
and we allow people, a lot of times people go to the polo field to watch their kids, but we give them a card that
Yeah.
says, yes, they can,
I don't think anything.
but I
in
don't
the
want somebody to
regional-
tell me that
Yeah.
up on my hill, if I wanted
Yeah.
to put one more house, which would be the only thing we do with one of our kids, that I have to genuflect.
Again, we're not a permitting agency. The role of the regional plan is to try to help guide economic development on a regional scale. And if there are developments that trigger Act 250, the regional plan has a regulatory role only with Act 250 and Section 248 permitting.
So unless,
Through the Public Utilities
so what you're
Commission,
saying,
so.
unless we decided one time that we would put a development on our farm, that would bring in Act 250 and all of that.
Yeah, I'm not an Act 250 expert, so you'd have to defer
Well,
to
I'm not
somebody
worried about that
here
because that's
who's-
not what we're going to do, but
So then I'm not sure that our plan really has any influence or role
Okay.
in the scenarios that you're laying out.
well, those are the questions that I got from plenty
Right.
of the people
We're not
along
a
that
regula-
river.
We're not a regulatory agency.
Okay.
You would not be coming to, we're not trying to
think we're
permit
property.
anything.
Okay.
So,
Can I ask a follow-up?
Yeah.
Because I think where you were going was maybe starting to answer my question, which is
1-acre house.
ultimately how this gets used. Is it,
mhm.
That's weird.
because I'm not an Act 250 person, I don't know.
Yeah.
So is it just when Act 250 applies and you're reviewing whether
Yeah, I figured it
permit
was
should be
houses. I'm
issued,
wondering how
is
many.
that part of it that they're looking at?
Is this the 2-acre
How does this
envelope
fit in
that
with this?
So I think that's
for
one of the
curtains, or
uses,
is
right?
there
I think
something-
that
and this pisses
as
me off.
diverse as the
This is,
topics
uh,
are
Was the
in this
B-lot
plan,
tribe,
I think
and
its
now he's in
users
violation of
are
Act
as
250,
diverse and
and
its
he's being
uses.
memorialized.
So the one,
So,
I mean, you could
this is
use
the-
this plan if you're a
he's
potential
violating-
developer and you want to get a sense for the region and
Oh,
where
yeah.
are they looking
Oh,
to
yeah.
promote growth.
Yeah.
It can be used as
Binding in
that
that
tool.
sense.
Correct, correct.
If you wanted to go
Whatever the-
Yes.
something high density
Well,
and a rural general
violating Act
area,
250 is what he's doing, but,
yeah,
yeah.
you could do that.
Okay, so I guess.
It,
theory.
it depends on whether you're gonna trigger Act
I think that's
250,
determined.
Sure.
right?
But the regional
So-
plan itself doesn't.
That's a standalone.
Correct.
tax
We
law,
only
so it is not
become a
current use, so it's
statutory
probably-
party
that's what they do.
if
They-
there is an
they
Act
just kinda
250
show the
or
house
Section
lots,
248
that kind of stuff,
permit,
yeah.
right? And Barbara would be, I think, a much better subject matter expert on this. In terms of our role, we have an opportunity in that permitting process to weigh in as to whether or not the development conforms with the regional plan, right? So
So that's a
in,
factor in the Act 250 process.
Correct.
Basically, it's just doesn't conform. And then
correct,
if it doesn't,
yeah.
well, that gets factored into many other
Right,
things.
yes.
Yeah.
So it's the intent that hopefully like your town plans, future land use map and the regional future land use map will be complementary, right? I mean, that's the hope.
Okay,
If there are instances where there are conflicts, the only instance in which I think the regional plan governs would be if the development rose to the level of substantial regional impact.
right. Okay, so we have a
Yeah.
couple of questions back here. One of them is the circular configuration. We figured these are house sites. So is that the
Yes.
2 acre?
So they're basically, if there is existing development in an area that would otherwise be rural conservation, it's shown as rural general.
Okay, but I'm curious as to why they're all circular, because nobody really mows their lawns that way, I don't think.
Yeah,
Is that because it's
I don't
the
know.
2 acre
I didn't
exemption?
make the map, so you're
Okay.
gonna have to follow up with a written question to Logan.
Okay.
Yep.
And this, all right, let me just start by saying this pisses me off. This is my farm. Okay, I'm in current use. Actually, you picked up some of my land, which I have not put in current use, but that's okay, it's undeveloped. Across the road is an old dairy barn that is being used, frankly, in violation of Act 250. I know because I've passed the enforcement.
Mhm.
But he is now put in an area that allows him to develop because that's what it looks like. And he's violating 250 by doing it. So I'm going to complain about this.
Okay,
And that would be a boundary adjustment, frankly, I think should be made. And I'm guessing this is my neighbor who is just, it's a separate piece of property and he has that acreage in the middle of my farm. So I'm guessing that's why that's there.
and it's probably not enrolled in current use.
No, because
So
it's too
it will
small,
show up
so-
as rural general.
Okay, so that explains that.
I assume that's how that boundary got made, is because he's not in the current use. That's why they.
Is
drove
that it?
around it.
It's 8.5 acres or something.
If it's not in current use, it would probably have fallen into the rural general because there wouldn't have been any other characteristics there that
Okay.
made it rural conservation.
Okay,
That would be, that's my understanding of the rationale
okay. Well,
based
that
on the
helps. Maybe I'm
category
less
definition.
pissed. Okay, just slightly. Okay, all right, this is good.
So-
We all should play by the same rules.
Yeah,
Yes, we should.
as
Yes, we
I
should.
said, this is really intended to be the start of a conversation.
Mhm.
So I encourage you to take some time to kind of, dissect the map, ask, assemble questions, and then, submit those questions in writing to Logan.
Okay,
And depending on the nature of the question, there may be things that he can answer back in writing, but they may be things that it really lend themselves better to having a conversation where we'd want to have him come to a working session or a public meeting again, to kind of sort through
okay.
in an attempt to kind of get the map finalized.
So when it says, and there are a couple, this is important to the town, that this is the transition zone infill. Is that the only use that can be made of it, infill, or is it anything in there? Because
So it's an area designated for higher density growth.
Okay, good.
It's served by public drinking water or sanitary sewer.
Yeah,
So it fits
We've
the.
got-
And it will
corridor
be-
was
yeah,
there.
okay.
So that will be transformed into higher density areas, and they're not downtown village center planned growth or village.
Okay,
New commercial
Used to be
linear
called.
strip development, however, is not allowed.
well,
Instead, it should be in the form of a network of streets to the extent that geography allows.
So it can be infill if there's, so this is the strip. I mean, this is.
That's a Route 7 corridor
That's the
south.
roof 7. I mean, this is
Between
our
the tra-
business area in town
Right.
primarily.
Mhm.
And to say it can't be strip developed, it already is. So then what happens? Can we not?
That's a good LURB question.
You should be writing these down, Mary,
Yeah.
you know, so we
Because
can.
frankly, we're counting on this area. And that includes the Diamond Run Mall.
The
doesn't it?
mall's
This whole
there.
thing's a mall,
Yeah.
G's across the road.
Yeah, so.
Yep.
The other.
So I don't know how closely you have been following the stand-up of the new land use review board. I mean, this is all just coming online, right? I would highly encourage you to, prepare very specific questions
Okay.
that would require some level of interpretation or guidance
Okay,
from the LURB, the Land Use Review Board, on these new areas.
I wouldn't
and
want to serve on
what
a
is,
LURB.
what is intended.
Could send a blurb to the
I'm
LURB.
sending the LURB. All right.
Yeah, so
that-
actually, if we put our road.
It fits right
it
in with
fits.
way
If
that's,
we
the-
put our road and then it becomes a network of roads and it's
Yes.
not a strip development.
right.
So,
There's reason to build that road.
yes, there is. There's
Yeah.
another one.
Yes. We're trying to get Granbury Road, Farrell Road and all
Yes,
these.
all connected back
to
in
one
there.
road.
Yeah.
These are
Yeah.
prime commercial
I
developments.
would, yes, so that you get some development off of the Route 4 corridor and you
But
can
like this
be
piece
kind
in
of,
the corner, that's
That
actually
does
Yeah.
open up
This is-
some land
Yes.
on the other side of the
Well, this
tracks
is
too there.
the
That's,
Audubon.
that might color, what the hell is that?
general,
This
rural
is-
general.
So,
Yeah.
so that doesn't prohibit building. right?
Correct,
Oh,
correct.
Cause that was the other part of the road.
either way,
was-
that's the property on the corner that's for sale.
Yeah, and so you wouldn't want it, want this to be rural right there. I don't think. I don't
No.
think you would want to carve out.
So the last thing I probably want to draw your attention to think about is that new village center. Okay? Mhm.
All
Okay.
12 houses.
So
Yeah.
that area,
Well, I think that's why we discussed with Barbara, it's not
Yeah.
worth going a zoning route because it's not gonna affect a large enough area of development in the town.
but that area
It wouldn't-
would come
It's
in
not-
Be worth us going for zoning because.
because
yeah.
it's not,
Yeah.
because it's not already existing in the state designation program, it would come in, I believe, as a step one center. So that's an entry level designation to, that would be eligible basically for these couple of benefits.
Cause there's actually
Better
no
Places Grant Program, so eligibility for downtown and village center tax credits, which, yeah. And
Because there's
funding
no
priority for
development.
municipal plan updates, it's pretty minimal, but I
Yes.
guess from it, yeah.
Yeah,
This little corner. I don't-
but you don't have to do
And then as
anything.
soon as
You,
spread out,
you know,
you're
just by having it on the
Yeah.
map as a village center, you know,
So it
you,
doesn't harm, it doesn't harm us.
you don't, right,
It
if
might
you don't
just
have to
happen.
apply for anything, you automatically would, transition in as a step one.
Could, for example, have this designated as a village center, because we don't have a village center.
So you can't, I don't think that you could get that as a village center based on how it's defined.
Had something to do with historic, something,
And
something.
it's all business. There's no residential to go with it. So I don't know if a village center requires some residential.
We looked at that.
We did. We were-
But that would be a good question for Logan.
It's gotta
And the point is, we're a town that doesn't have a natural center.
well, we haven't.
Yeah,
Well,
The
it's-
center,
The
the
white
We
part.
center
gave
is,
it to the city.
yeah, the
city
center
took
is
it, yeah.
not
Right.
ours.
So,
right.
so this no strip development is punitive to us because it's all we got.
Yeah.
We got spider webs coming out from
Yeah.
the city center.
Yeah.
So what are they going to do? And we're not alone. I mean, there's St. Albans Town and
I think
Yeah.
it's worth asking.
I think it is.
Ask the
So it's
question.
Logan, eh?
Yes.
Okay.
There's a little bit of
I'll tell
developable
him.
land, right? Well, that's actually where Thomas's are, developing land.
But yes,
Trying to
so
see
the
if-
reason that we're asking for,
Oh,
you know,
That's
we've
where
got
the
to have
solar's
everything kind of
Quite
buttoned
an
up
excavation project.
in terms of a final
Evidently need a
plan
landing area.
to
Wow.
present to our board and
Big
get into
research.
kind of the graphics
Oh.
production in terms of the layout later this summer. So we're, you know, our
can't make
timeline, we're, you know,
everybody
we're having, you know, we have a schedule that we have to adhere to. So we, you know, we really are looking for kind of within 3 weeks to kind of get your questions assembled and get them into Logan so that there is time to have the conversations and make adjustments if, you know, if he finds that they would conform.
All right. And the deadline again?
It May 21 in this packet on your page where I've got your pie chart, I've got your date.
Rural general.
Or what, do we have a different date than other people?
Yes, because
Because-
it's 3 weeks from the date of this. meeting. Yeah,
gotcha.
we're trying to give
Okay.
everybody the same amount of time and just stagger it so Logan doesn't get inundated with 27 towns emails all on the same day. We're trying to, you know, make it a little bit more manageable
Okay.
to respond to in a timely way. So on this page where your pie chart is, you know, the number 1 was your first opportunity to react to, you know, the future land use map. Number 2, it says if eligible, you're not. So number 2 doesn't apply to you guys. But for me to just kind of wrap up tonight, I'll pull back out and kind of just make the point that, you know, the point is not just to make a map. It's to designate areas in which certain priorities are furthered to achieve the suite of community economic development goals. You know, each of our chapters has a goal associated with it to help accomplish that coordinated and effective community economic development for the region. So as I said, we're in the home stretch of, you know, wrapping up and getting a final draft ready that will, you know, we'll start then the statutory hearing process, the beginning of next year. So at this point, there's no other way for me to say it. The regional plan is dense. Okay. It is a slog, you know, to try to get through. It's a lot of material and we recognize that. So we're trying to come up with different, I guess, levels of detail to react to the priorities that we're trying to put forth in this plan. So the lightest is this graphic. So it's more of a very like lighthearted, conversational kind of, I think of it as being very vintage. I think of those old Vermont state maps with the points of interest, and it's kind of, you know, kitschy, but you know, the little blurbs do make a point, right? And they represent, each of those blurbs represents a priority from at least one of our regional plan chapters, if not crossover. So that is our, like, if you only want to spend 30 seconds and kind of get the gist of kind of what we think is important and what we're trying to, you know, further with this plan, you'd look at the graphic and you'd ask yourself these same 2 questions that I started with. You know, do these priorities reflect kind of the right community economic development targets for the region? And, you know, if they do, you know, is that the kind of thing that would make this a place you want to be a part of, right? Because at the end of the day, that's what community economic development is about, right? It's improving quality of life. It's making your place great. It's making your place, you know, somewhere where people want to stay if they already live here or come here, right?
So the overarching concern or push that I've heard lately is for housing.
Yes.
How does especially the land use designations in Rutland Town relate to housing.
Well, if you were tier 1B eligible,
Uh-huh.
that's where you would get a real benefit
Because we
because
wouldn't go through Act 250.
you
Or the
could,
developer wouldn't.
yes, housing and mixed use developments of 50 units or fewer on 10 acres or less in either a downtown center, a village center, a planned growth area, or a village area would be exempt from Act 250. But that's not on your
Okay.
that's not on your pick list. So it kind of, that I think that was the biggest.
So it
Push for
doesn't
that.
preclude additional housing in Rutland Town. It's just developers would then have to go through the Act 250 process.
If
with
that's triggered, yes.
Okay.
Yep. So if you're willing to spend a little bit more time than just kind of reacting to our fun graphic, we now have 1-page summaries of each of the topical chapters. And the summaries kind of state what the goal is for that chapter. It walks you through kind of the key current conditions in that topic, whether it's housing, transportation, economic development, then talks a little bit about what are the future trends that are really shaping and informing that particular aspect of community economic development, and kind of what are the needs, like where is it that we are wanting to go based on the current baseline. And then it kind of wraps up with a kind of more summarized presentation of the priorities, the policies for that chapter. And then if you really want to dig in and read the chapter in full, like if you were really interested in just housing, you could read the full housing chapter. So this graphic and the chapter summaries are going to be available on our landing page later this week. So at the end of your presentation, it's that rutlandrpc.org/plan 2026. You will also be able to find on that landing page a digital copy of this presentation slides, a PDF of this map, and you'll have a link to the interactive online map kind of in an ARC platform. So you could actually zoom into it, and the background in the interactive map is an ortho photo.
Okay.
I've asked Logan to see if he can, because I was in Wallingford last night and they said, is there a version of this map where there's parcel boundaries? And so I asked Logan if he could trigger a parcel boundary layer on the interactive map. And when you click on a land use area, it gets a blue halo around it so you can see really clearly, where that area is in the interactive version. So all of those materials, again, available on the landing page, and the full draft will be coming in early June.
Question.
Mm-hmm.
So we were talking about this issue of the transition infill areas. And I'm wondering, based on the definitions, if we did have zoning, if then all of those would actually fit under the definition of planned growth areas. So that's kind of that's the issue.
You can't have any village areas or planned growth areas because you don't have zoning.
That's what they really are. It's just we don't have zoning.
Right.
And they surround a center. It's just not our center.
Right.
Yeah.
Which doesn't say that that's a problem necessarily, but if we had zoning, maybe they would qualify, whether it's useful for them to
Yeah.
qualify.
Logan gave me a cheat
G.
sheet,
So if it's a plan,
but basically you have no planned growth areas or village areas because you don't have zoning.
If
That's
they
really the
were-
only reason.
if they were a planned growth area, then they would avoid Act 250 for development in those areas.
For housing, right?
So, and in your prep packet,
Chart.
yep, pages 6, 7, and 8, it's the right-hand column.
Tier
Oh,
1B.
prep pack.
So there are 6 different eligibility criteria for tier 1B. I don't know if there are, 1A is going to be a really super stretch for some communities in the region. And it's only available to those communities who have both flood hazard and river corridor bylaws. And there aren't very many of those. There's maybe 4 or 5 in the region who have both of those and have zoning and everything else. So,
Overachievers.
yeah. So Matt, to answer your question, you know, if you really have to kind of zero in on all 6 of the criteria for tier 1B. In addition to the zoning piece.
So. Okay, so, and it says tiers 1A and 1B to get you the exemption.
Correct. So if you,
So the question, so it's if, it could be a 1B if it meets all of these.
so the way 1Bs are working is if you currently meet all of the 6 eligibility criteria. And if you, so let's say you did meet all the eligibility criteria, I would be having a conversation with you guys tonight that would look very different. Like when I was in Wallingford last night, they have all 4. They have a downtown, 2 villages, planned growth areas, and village areas. And all, whether it's in kind of the core of Wallingford, East Wallingford, South Wallingford. So they are contemplating whether they opt in for tier 1B for all 4 of those areas in their community, right?
Okay, but so now. So I can understand these 2 charts. So then how does the benefit summary translate with the,
Kind of different. They're different things. So it's just that those 4 core land use categories align now with the state designation program and the location-based Act 250 for tier 1. But those are separate things.
okay, so what, tell me again what this is.
So that's the state designation program. Right now, Rutland Town doesn't have a designated village center or downtown. But what is being proposed is this little village center here in the bright pink. So if that stays and it becomes part of the adopted regional future land use map, Rutland Town would then be eligible for step 1 center benefits that are on page 5.
So none of this would have to do with a planned
Correct.
development, right? It's
Correct.
just, but the Act 250 exemption would apply?
Yes.
Got it.
Just in that area.
Just in that area and just 1B, which means
Right.
it would only apply to 50 units or fewer on 10 acres or less for housing or mixed use development would be exempt from Act 250. If you were a tier 1A, all development would be fully exempt.
So
from
if
Act
somebody, if you're a 1B and somebody just wants to put in a box store that doesn't.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
But if that area, is that all of Center Rutland? Do we know? Because
That's the last.
when we did a study with West Rutland about the corridor between us
Mhm.
and Business Route 4, one of the uses that popped up as a need for the region
Did you
was
get that tonight?
small, housing units for singles and for elderly folks. And that would be probably very much concentrated, probably a, 2 or 3 story building.
Kind of like what West Rutland is building right now.
Well, I'm not sure what they're building, but
Yeah.
this was, I mean,
Well,
this
the
could,
town isn't, but yeah, there's
Yeah.
a big
but
3-story going in. Yeah.
so that would be, I'm just curious to know how big the boundary is, if that includes all of Rutland Town and Center Rutland.
Well, right now,
It doesn't
none of
look it.
this
Yeah,
local based jurisdiction is eligible. You're not eligible
Yeah.
for any of that.
all right.
And
'Cause
you
we don't
wouldn't
have
be
zoning.
eligible for it prior to our plan getting adopted because you're not going to adopt
right.
zoning before our regional plan gets adopted.
No.
Right. So, but if at some point in the future
Mhm.
that, that does become something that the municipality moves forward with, then you would, you could apply, I think at that time, I think that's the intent. But what they're trying to do right now for tier 1B areas is basically if that area is shown on the future land use, the regional future land use map, and the municipality wants to opt in, you're in.
And then
Okay.
the village district that's drawn on the map is just from here to the trestle out to Dewey Field. All it shows.
So it wouldn't have any of that redeveloped or
Yeah.
redevelopable area. Yeah. Too bad.
So,
And so really what that area is getting you is kind of the step one benefits. And there will be a structure in place in the future for you to step up to step 2 or 3. I don't know what that looks like yet because they haven't rolled anything out. But it's on the horizon.
sounds like our wonderful state. Put things out and they don't know what it is yet.
But you have to start somewhere.
What I'm kind of bemused by, I guess, is that you're calling it the future land use map, but you're very heavily relying on what has occurred there and what exists there in the past.
That's based on the land use category definitions.
Yeah.
Yep.
So it's not really
Yep.
future so much as a reflection
I
of,
think I think it's very consistent with the state's land use goal.
yeah, probably. Yeah.
That's
Land,
close.
land
Density, yeah.
development
Yeah.
to maintain the historic settlement patterns
Yeah.
of downtown and village center growth surrounded by rural countryside. Unless you're in an area like a transition or infill or an enterprise. You know, and I mean, the purpose of the rural general is to recognize that there is development happening in the rural countryside. You know, I mean, 40% of buildings are in that
Yeah,
land use category. It's just not that higher density. You know, where are we going to, like you're talking about putting in new sewer infrastructure, new roads, you know, this kind of planning helps you think about where to prioritize those kinds of municipal investments to support growth that will ultimately, you know, I think improve the tax base and all that good stuff, right?
well, we've put water lines in down there.
We've done one,
We've done one.
need
We've-
another one or two.
We've got the scoping study for a bypass road, a utility road down there. So,
We're pretty much on track where we want to build a road and goes with the designated areas, so we're,
yeah,
and it is in that area.
it
so-
is in the area
That's
and
what I'm hoping. I'm hoping that when you look at this, you know, it will align with things that you want to do as a
Widen
community.
that corridor on Post Road a little.
Well,
Yeah, and down on the south end, it'd be nice to pick up a couple more parcels into that infill.
but is there anything
Oh,
else that
yeah,
I can
the one you
maybe
pointed to, yeah.
help you think about or try to answer before I?
I think we can
Wrap
fumble
you
our
up?
way through it.
Well, as I said, it's really intended to be kind of the start of a more lengthy discussion. And I really, I highly encourage you to document some questions that might
Okay.
Realistic.
not be something even our office can answer, but Logan or
And I
Devin
don't
would
know
certainly
what they
forward them
allow.
on to the land use review board for,
Okay.
you know, at least consideration. Can't guarantee you we'll get an answer, but we would at least be that conduit.
Rural general.
Okay.
Okay.
Let's transition.
Anything else? Or we've got a few other things on our agenda.
Yeah, I think we're good for now.
Okay. Thank you very
You're
much.
so welcome. I'll gather up my stuff and peel on out of here and you guys can finish up.
We don't get to keep the
We're
draft.
gonna keep
Okay,
this.
good.
And
Good, good.
underneath it, which I, you know, brought just for comparison is the current future land use map.
As shown in the regional plan as opposed to our town plan.
Regional
Okay.
future land use map. Yep, I just
Okay.
wanted you to be able to do a comparison of
Yes, good.
2018. It's,
This is a
you know,
lot.
I think you'll find there's some consistency in the scale of land use, but obviously the categories and everything are totally different. So,
Okay,
okay, but
Those are
yes, I
helpful.
will leave those. I will just take these other things out.
okay,
Perfect.
thank you.
This map is definitely a lot more
Yeah,
diverse than this is.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're on our action items for today's meeting. We've met with Stephanie from the Regional Planning Commission. Thank you very much. We're on, that's A. B, we're going to push off the excavator for the Highway Department until next week. C, review the plan and agreement to replace the town police, or town police department firearms. Okay, and on your desk is, there are 3 pages representing three revised bids that we have. And you folks may as well come up in case there are questions. The top 2 indicate the net cost for replacing our existing Sig Sauers
Yes.
with Glocks. Okay. And that includes the trade-in. I mean, there's a deduction for the trade-in there. Okay. The first 2 include the trade-in. The last one, which is the highest bid, has no provision for a trade-in discount. So, a couple of things that Matt and I reviewed this with the police committee, with the chief and the deputy chief, and we're going to recommend, even though the price is slightly higher than it was previously, we're going to recommend that we go with Black Dog Shooting Supplies, which are local. They're giving us a decent trade-in value, and the total cost for replacing the 7 handguns is $7,231. One thing that we also wanted to do is make sure that the town is taking itself out of any liability for the handguns that we're trading in, because these have we're doing it because we think they might be defective. We don't want to be liable for them. So
So even though that's a manufacturer defect, we still could possibly be liable.
I don't know, but I'm taking no chances.
Okay. Well, because for me, it's like, well, we didn't build the gun and we're just.
No, we didn't.
You know, as an individual, if I had that gun and I went to Black Dog and told them I want to trade this in for that, I wouldn't even think about the fact if the next guy gets it, shoots himself. Well, that's not my problem.
Yeah.
But because we're a town, I guess maybe they'd come looking.
There's too many lawyers in the world, Joe.
Yeah. But how are you going to, when you go,
Not enough.
but the thing is
Not
those
enough.
7 guns, I guess, if you bought a used, and I'm just asking this because it annoys me that we have to do this, is if I went down to Black Dog and bought one of the guns, are they obligated to tell me where it came from?
No.
So unless somebody did some real research, they never know if that gun ever, because to me, anybody listening to this is thinking, oh, well, I buy one of these defective guns and I shoot myself, I can go see if I can hang somebody. Okay, right.
Well,
But I
But
like,
you're not
I
pointing
mean,
it out
I know
to
we
the
have to protect
public.
it.
we
And I'm
need
not
to do that.
disagreeing,
That's what
and I'm
I'm
not
doing.
disagreeing.
Okay.
It's the
okay.
stupidity.
So Ted found, you'll love this. He didn't go to a lawyer. He went online, right? So we got this bill of sale that Matt and I have both taken a look at. I've added a couple of things, but basically it's Black Dog. Is that the name? I keep
Yeah.
getting it. Black Bear, whatever. Black Dog is understanding that they're assuming liability and that we have nothing to do with it. And we're not giving any warranties at all about the usability of any kind about these
Buying this
guns.
as is,
Other-
where is.
And as is in there,
Yeah.
other than we own it. That's the only warranty. We own it. We have the right to convey. So that,
I'm just, I'm not,
do
never.
you want to do a lawyer thing?
No, it's just that I'm just thinking if I sold a car to somebody and it's as is, and this make and model car has a known defect, it's like, do you point it out or, but I know the guns, this is well publicized.
Joe,
This is-
they have to put warning labels on laundry detergent saying not to eat it. So
Right.
this is the type of world
They
we
have to
live in,
put
unfortunately.
warning labels on cups of coffee to tell you that it's hot.
It's hot.
Don't put it between your legs when you're driving
Doesn't
out of
even
McDonald's.
sound tasty to me.
Well,
I mention it because I have the standard form that I use and it was pretty close. When you're closing on a house, all right, you do the deed and you do all of that stuff, but there's usually the refrigerator and the stove and they go with the house. You have a bill of sale that says, okay, this personal property, which isn't covered under the deed, we're conveying that no warranties as is, where is. Okay, so it's just carrying through that.
Yeah.
I'm
That's-
just,
yeah.
we're not objecting. It's just
it's the,
You're yanking
it's-
my chain just a tad, and that's okay.
it's,
it's just sad that society's in that
I mean,
type of
it's
place
the-
now.
it's the stuff you have to do because half the world doesn't know if they're on foot or horseback.
I had the same attitude about attorneys until I needed one. Then it was my best friend.
Yeah.
He's in that space where he doesn't need one right now, so.
There's two categories of attorneys in
Well.
this world, yours and the other guys.
You know, actually,
They're very different.
your profession is that way.
Yes.
People some people have very little to do with the PD until, oh God, I need them. And now it's like,
Yeah.
maybe they aren't so bad.
That's
And
why the
it's-
firefighters are always the heroes and the
Yeah.
police guys,
They are.
not so much. Okay, so Matt, would you
Yeah.
like to make a motion?
I move that we approve the contract with the quote and the bill of sale with Black Dog as proposed by Ted.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded, and this is for 7231. We're all agreed on that amount now, right? Okay. Any further discussion? This includes the trade-in.
Yes.
Okay.
Still pretty.
Further discussion?
Repeat
Oh,
this.
money is to come from
Appreciation.
depreciation. If not, all in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All in favor. Okay. So that takes care of that one. Next is review of the agreement for new services from Consolidated Communications for the Public Safety Building. This is a separate one that Bill left on my table. Did you guys get a copy?
I don't think so, but that's.
All right. Well, frankly,
did, I missed
there's many pages, but not much to it. In short, you'll recall that we need a single dedicated line for the AFIS machine.
Yeah.
And this will authorize, and the suggestion is, well, it doesn't say who. But we can authorize Bill to sign on behalf of the town. And it is for that line at a charge, he tells me, and there's, the cost is $20 per month for that dedicated line.
Move to approve.
Motion's been
Second.
made to approve and seconded. And to authorize whom to sign? Who would you like to?
Want to sign it now? You got it in your hands.
Why don't you sign it, Mary?
Because frankly, there are a lot of blanks in it and Bill is aware of what the blanks are. And me less so. And there's more of this to come because there is some more work that
Let's let
We'll
somebody
bring
consolidated.
you-
else sweat. for a while.
Mary,
We thought we'd make Mary
We'll bring
sweat.
you food in prison. It's not a problem.
You know, but they won't. They made that clear. So
Oh, did they?
yes, just saying. Okay, fine.
You guys are nasty.
About
tonight.
what?
Pretty much. Okay, all in favor of
You dragged me in here on an off week. What do you want?
authorizing the Consolidated Communications dedicated line for AFIS, $20 a month, and Bill to sign on behalf of the town, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All in favor. So.
Thank you.
Oh yeah, it was yours too. Okay, yeah. Tasers. All right.
You didn't have to do anything.
So we have some information.
Okay, so the representative called me back. He said that charge is the model bundle we're purchasing. His words to me were like, okay, so you go to a Chevy dealership, you buy a Tahoe. That is the model you're buying. Yep. You're buying the Taser 10 bundle model. that is what that price is.
So we can't knock out the
It
$595.
says it's part of it. So that quote should read 8,000. I think it was $19 and
Yeah, the total
Change.
package is
40,000.
40,000.
Except that they're gonna build that on a one-time basis, right? It's not spread out over the.
that's why it was the 8,000 was it was supposed to be spread out over the life of the contract.
Okay.
not a single payment.
So she's changing it then.
So he's not sure why my quote says that because it's supposed to say $8,019. I'm like, well, it doesn't.
So the savings you said we had, is there still any or
It's
do
still
we?
there. It's just
Okay.
not as great.
Okay.
And this is for,
The new taser,
New taser 10.
New
and how long is
tasers.
the contract?
5 years.
5 years. So it's about $8,000 a year to have
Yeah, pretty much.
7 units, right?
8.
8.
The total contract price over 5 spread, it's a 5-year contract, $40,099.20.
And this is something we've
That's
been
the
doing, right?
package.
It is.
But
It's a newer model.
the
The
new
latest, greatest technology. It doesn't use
one
forced
until
air
next week.
anymore. It uses actual gunpowder to
And-
shoot the doors
Correct.
out.
Did we
Yes.
actually save some money with this
We
package?
did.
There,
We did.
okay. Okay. So is there a motion?
Move to approve.
Second,
One signature line.
Signature line.
Have you got an original? Cause I just
It's
marked
just
mine up.
literally in my email. He just sent it to me and I don't have a printer here, so.
All right,
Don't
so
tell me
let
you
me,
want another
Authorize
printer.
it.
No, we're good.
Can we authorize the police chief to sign on
I
behalf?
think we can. You want to sign?
Sure, I'll sign.
Okay, fine.
So-
Make sure Bill gets a copy of it.
Yep.
Okay, motion's been made to authorize? Who made the motion? Sorry.
I
Joey did and I seconded.
authorize the chief to sign on behalf
Okay,
of the town.
and second?
Yep.
Okay, motion's made and seconded. All in favor of the taser contract for $40,099 and whatever the cents were over 5 years
Like it
with the
was
chief
20
to sign.
cents.
Very good, thank you. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, it's approved and when you get it, you can sign it.
I will.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, Chief Dumas to sign. All right, the
Printer.
printer, copier, this is,
That we determined we didn't have to approve this.
well, okay, but since it was because it all comes from, all right, Lynette needs a printer up at the new public safety
She
building.
already has one.
Yeah. She does.
We just haven't agreed to it yet.
Right. So,
I apologize.
Well,
this,
it happens.
and we need to authorize the contract with SimQuest. That's what we need to do. So we did, even if you were within your budget and you were okay with approving it, we still have to authorize this a 5-year contract with SimQuest.
And is this contract similar to the others we have with them for the?
Same thing the fire department has. In the chief's office, I guess. It's the same exact printer.
$62 a month.
We're doing, and the printers here are all through them too, right?
Yeah.
We have one that's not with them, but as soon as that's contract's up, we're switching to SimQuest for that one.
Okay.
Now,
It's one in the squad room that has access to internet. Or you can do what we have to do, fax, all the 3 things it does: print, fax, and copy stuff onto a thumb drive so you can make an email.
okay, now, so the request is to approve the contract. We need a motion to approve the contract and have Bill sign because it's all set up for the
So
town
moved.
administrator to sign. Motion's made and seconded? Okay,
Those two, yeah.
okay.
I'll work
Any
over here.
discussion?
I did it last time.
If not, all in favor of the SimQuest contract, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, approved, 4-1, 5-1, 5-0. All right, this extra meeting is, jeez, it's getting to me. That takes care of the things that we reviewed. And that takes care of D. Oh, review the proposal for transfer switch for the public safety building sprinkler pump. Okay,
So I have it.
all right,
You're done with us? Are you done?
just gotta make sure,
Are you guys on board? As Gary told you what the paving schedule is?
What, Monday, Tuesday?
next week.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
so just
we'll
be
make
aware.
sure we're out of the way.
Yep. But the area out back where the impound yard is, where the stone is not being paved.
That's fine.
Yeah, that'll be on us later on. So, I mean, if you need to park a vehicle out there while they're paving or whatever, but I don't know, you may have to shift stuff around. They don't want you driving on the hot pavement right off, so.
I can understand. So yeah,
Figure out where you-
Gary came to us and we'll work it all out. Won't be
Okay,
an
I just
issue.
wanted to make sure you guys, I'm just glad they weren't paving today.
Yes. Yeah, that'd have been a nightmare.
Cause that would have really come.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Perfect. Well, and they did put the plate on the door.
They did.
Yes.
Yeah,
That's
he
done
did.
today.
Yep.
So do we do anything with the transfer switch?
I'd like to.
Okay, go right ahead.
So, we have a change order, and actually we have two change orders here. This is the first, I've seen the other one, but the first change order was for the pull station. That the app, added to the, I guess that's the maintenance bay of the police department because it has a walkout door. There was no, pull station. And
Oh.
that's $1,622.94.
And what's your recommendation?
We have no choice, yeah.
It's part of the inspection from
Yeah,
the
and
state.
so I did a little research and I talked to JP about some of this stuff and because of his, legal things, representing insurance companies,
Mhm.
when towns and stuff were going back after contractors or architects for stuff that was omitted, what the rulings eventually came, and I think there was some changes in the state's laws at statute. I'm not sure, but if an item is required by statute or code and it's omitted, the owner doesn't have any grounds for asking for that to be paid for by somebody else. If it's so, a pull station was supposed to be there, but it was missed. Had it been in the original plan, we would have paid for it. My argument is it wouldn't have been $1,622.
Mhm.
You know, it would probably be like $100 because you're running wires and there's no FRP board and you just stick it in. So when they go back, so I do have a little bit of argument, but we don't have any grounds to stand on because they had to go back and put them in.
All right.
All right,
So
so-
your recommendation is we go with
So we're
that.
gonna have, this is the first change order that
Okay,
came down and this has been done and installed. So that adds, the 1622 and this change order has been signed by Ed Clark and
okay.
Vic Shappy. Who signs on behalf of the town? Was JP signing these as clerk of the
I
work?
can't remember. It's been a while since we've done one.
Okay,
Um,
I mean, whatever. So that one there, that job's already been done.
okay,
That's-
so let's take that one right now then. So, I'll treat your report as a motion to
Yes,
approve
this is,
the
do
change order, and who do you want to sign it?
you want me to? I will.
Okay, we
I'm
got
fine
signatures
with
on, that's
signing.
fine with me.
Second,
Motion's made and seconded.
Yep.
Joey to sign. All in favor of the pull station for 1622.94 and Joey signing, please say aye.
aye.
Aye, 5-0 approved. Okay,
So, and,
order number 2.
and then change order, well, this actually 007, and this is automatic transfer switch. This,
Yeah,
this, it appears there is no additional electric. There's nothing additional here other than the difference between the one we bought and the one we want.
okay.
And that sum is 22,457. I checked with Carrie,
Uh-huh.
and her, numbers, tell us that that's what's available in the capital improvement fund.
Okay.
There's 83,000, so I guess I would move that. We would go ahead and, authorize the, installation of the transfer switch.
And you
Second.
you to sign?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Motion's been made and seconded, for 22,457, Joey to sign. And by the way, Carrie reports that as of today's date, there's 83,282 in the capital improvement fund.
Yep.
Joe, remind me, are we getting some credit for what they're taking out or is that just waste?
$9,000. The
Is that a
transfer
net
switch is,
amount?
The transfer switch is $32,327.
So 9 grand what we paid.
And we paid $9,870
We're getting full credit.
for the, yes,
So the sole difference is we
20
would have,
yep.
if they knew about it, if they planned it properly, we would have paid the extra.
right.
money.
That's the argument. That's why I said, well, can't we split the cost? And Vic said, if it would have been in the original bid, the bid would have been 20 grand more. So, and I don't know how to argue that.
Yeah.
I have no argument.
The only other part of this is it's gonna take, what, more than 6 weeks to
We're
get done?
6 weeks out. But what we need, the reason I kind of been pushing you guys a little bit to get this done sooner rather than later is I don't know how long the state's gonna be patient with us using the fire pump
Not very long.
to do it. You know, this was supposed to be temporary.
Yeah.
That was my point, is I talked to the Department of Fire Safety and the fire marshal who was doing the inspecting, and he's ticked that the fire pump's not already hooked
Well,
up.
so are we.
And the part of the issue is, and I'll put some of this, it's taken VMS almost 6-7 weeks to get us this number.
Oh, okay.
So I think they could have been a little faster, but now that we have this in the works, I'm hoping this will pacify.
And then the Department of Fire Safety also said that there's really no need to hook this to the generator. So, I mean, I know we were supposed to have it, but man, I'd really like to put $22,000 towards a cascade system that is actually gonna get more use or actual benefit to the town and the firemen, rather than hook this to a transfer switch that's, I mean, like if we hook this up to the transfer switch, say we have a long-term power outage, like say a grid outage, like whole Northeast power outage, that building's going to be occupied because it's the emergency management center.
Mhm.
So it's essentially going to have a fire watch because there's going to be people
Oh.
in that building. It's going to be occupied. So in the short term couple hour, windstorms that come through, half the time the fire department's going to be there anyway when there's no power. So there's again going to be a fire watch, and the rare probability that the station's going to happen to catch on fire while it's out of power when running on the generator is so slim, especially since the fire alarm system will still trip because the fire alarm's tied to the generator. So the fire alarm will still trip saying there's a fire in the building. The fire department will still respond to it. The only thing you're not going to have is a sprinkler system. And because of the nature of the building and the type and build of the building, the actual flammability of the building so low that the damage isn't going to be that different whether the sprinkler's running or not.
Unless it's a truck.
Yeah.
That's my only concern. If it's
Yeah,
one of the
if it's
trucks
the
or one of
truck.
the cruisers, that would be my
If it's a
concern.
truck or cruiser, that sprinkler system's not going to be rated to.
Oh, and then
keep
there's the
that.
police department in there too.
Right. Does the fire chief have an opinion?
Does the fire chief, Chris I do believe Chris would like to see this hooked up.
So to understand Kurt's point, or your first point is, so right, we got a fire pump look to fill trucks, right?
Right.
And we got a sprinkler pump.
Right.
Mhm.
Both of which could be hooked up to what we have now, but wouldn't operate on generator.
Once the sprinkler pump is hooked up and it's into the system, the other pump will not be part of that system any longer. It's just for filling the trucks. It's not like a backup for
So
the other pump.
the sprinkler pump's already in
It's in,
and it's tied to the
or the fire pump.
the fire pump's
The
already
fill
in.
pump's in, the sprinkler pump's there, but it's not wired or plumbed.
Because they haven't wired it yet, because we're talking about changing
They
control.
could hook it up to what we have, it just wouldn't operate on the generator.
Yeah, it could be operational, say,
The funny
Tomorrow.
thing is,
essentially.
How
the
hard
funny
is it
part of
to-
this is the station is better covered right now with a fill pump for the trucks because that pump is on the switch, is on the transfer. So if there was no power there tonight and there was a fire, that pump will come on.
So how hard is it to connect the sprinkler pump to the switch now?
I do believe there is, I don't know if there's a way to manually, I don't know if there's any way to hook the sprinkler, to make the sprinkler pump run from the generator now. I don't
should
believe there's
reword
any
that. I mean,
circuitry
just
for that.
just hook it to power so that the state would be happy.
Yeah.
Because I'm wondering, so even if we did go with if we wanted to change the transfer switch does it make sense to hook it up in the meantime, keep the state happy, and then you change it when you swap it out? Or is that?
Then you're gonna pay for a second, because the wiring is different,
Yeah, and they don't want to punch holes in the controller,
right?
in the
Okay,
control
that's
panel,
right.
because in order to run the wire in, they have to punch holes in it.
Right, so we'll get full credit for the 10 grand switch that's there, that controller, but if we start putting holes in it, now it becomes used.
Yeah. So that's why they haven't hooked it up yet.
That's why, yeah, they're waiting on us.
And the fire marshal's response was because of the fire, because of the type of building and the fire load and how reliable the power is. That's why he actually wrote a letter saying that the fire pump does not need to be hooked to the generator.
And,
So when it burns down, they're not going to look at us like we're crazy.
well,
If
They're
it,
not our
given,
insurance.
you know,
if it
like,
burns down, VLCT is going to buy some new fire trucks.
Well, I guess that's the question.
But I mean,
why didn't you have?
we had a fire station up there since 1967 that never had it. I mean, it didn't have a fire alarm in it for the longest time.
But
and
we've
the
also
reason,
now got a police station in
the
there. It
re,
isn't
so
just
the two
fire.
buildings together makes me want to put the
Yeah.
switch in and do it.
Yeah,
You know, it's funny because you know why I installed the fire alarms in the two stations? Because two fire stations and a town highway garage burnt within a year. And neither
Yeah.
one of them were alarmed. This was back in 2003, 2004. And I said, yeah, this looks good. We're out here pushing fire alarms and sprinklers, and here we got two buildings with neither. So,
okay.
anyway,
Does
So,
it make a difference to our insurance at all?
what's that?
Does this make a difference on our insurance?
That I couldn't tell you. Probably, you know, they're looking at it as a sprinkled building. It's a sprinkled building, so the entry, you know, and to Kurt's point, and I understand that other point is the feasibility or the possibility of these things occurring together are slim, but the point being, do we want to risk a $5 million building with another $3 million worth of equipment in it?
What are the
You have
odds?
to look at that the big figure.
All the possibilities of fire that could befall this building. What are the odds are that it comes from the generator blowing up?
Won't be the
It
generator.
could come from the transfer switch.
Yeah.
And the other part is if the
The-
transfer switch doesn't get transferred enough, the transfer switch might not transfer.
So there's some other
So I
little
mean,
things, but
there's all kinds of
but-
possibilities.
so we've got a motion on the floor.
Yeah.
And is there any more discussion? I think it's to have Joe sign if we approve it. All right,
With the money raised plus this, we'd be halfway to a cascade system. It's my only other,
That other half is still large.
yeah, it is a large.
which we are close to having.
Well, we got the end of the fiscal year coming up too. So
Yeah.
that's gonna make a difference.
There's that.
We could save
All right.
$22,000 and put it towards something that's gonna get used
I,
monthly.
Kurt and I are on different sizes.
I could
I would
sort of
feel more
tell.
comfortable that it's in there, but that's.
I could sort of tell. Okay.
But that's all right. I mean, there's some
Are we
well-made
ready to
points.
vote?
I am, yeah.
All right. Everybody ready to vote? All right. All in favor of the transfer switch change order at a net of 22,457? Please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Anyone opposed?
Opposed.
Okay, vote is 4-1. And the motion carries and Joe's authorized to sign.
Oh. Since
Okay,
this is my first time, I gotta figure out how to do this. Yeah, I got the forms. I gotta see who I get them to, but
yeah, we should have you sign way more stuff. I think that would be good. Yes. The
Okay.
clerk is supposed to sign stuff.
all
Yeah.
right.
Okay, is there any other business? We haven't warned it for any other business. What is this? This is the thing that Bill gets to sign, and I'm gonna leave that for him. And leave that there, and there's
Read it. You could have read it last week.
the black dog, which you're going to
You gotta go
get
to
to the
bed tonight,
chief to
just start reading
sign.
it.
Huh?
If you gotta go to bed tonight, just start reading it.
Other,
Was I
What
sending
what
the
is,
black dog?
what
or
is
was I
our
signing
plan
the,
to talk about this?
Was I sending the taser?
do you
What-
want to add it to the agenda for next meeting
I mean, if we're gonna make some changes or do something, we need
on
to,
the regional plan,
yeah,
regional, okay.
something we want to discuss.
You want me to sign the black dog too? Cause it was just the taser thing you want me to sign. You didn't say anything about black dog.
I'm just gonna do,
Oh, that, so the way the language changed it, Mary, you had it to where I think you wanted Bill to sign because it was this. town
whatever we
approval.
authorized.
Bill is
Yes,
Signing for
Okay.
consolidated,
Yes, you put
And-
down Bill.
and the chief is signing for the tasers.
Correct.
And did somebody have to sign for the guns or no?
yes,
Bill's
because he's signing on behalf of the town, because we have that hold harmless thing that we
Okay.
want signed. So yes,
So we have everybody's signature and what it needs to be.
okay. Is there any other motion? Oh, Bill, would you add to our agenda for next Tuesday's meeting discussion of the draft regional plan? So we'll put that on and we'll talk about it.
Oh, boy.
Okay? We have 3 weeks to do it.
Second.
Motion's made to adjourn, seconded, and it's non-debatable. All in favor, please say aye.
All right.
Aye.